Hello, DOKU.TECH. Thank you all for having me. It's very exciting for me, and it's an honor for me to be a part of a community like this. Two of the things that I'd like to talk to you about today are two of the the challenges that I see in technology and how they're related. One is the diversity issue in technology and trying to get a more diverse workforce into technology. But it's also about diversifying the applications of technology and how we can use it in more creative ways for more social impact. So I found that in my experience so far, there are really two pieces of that that I found to be particularly effective that I already see happening here today at DOKU.TECH. So that's why I'm so excited to be a part of this, and I just want to say thank you to the IPCO Foundation and everyone working at DOKU.TECH and everyone who's been so wonderful putting this event together. So I was very excited by that the theme for DOKU.TECH this year was flipping the script, because those two pieces that I see as solutions to these problems. Can everyone hear me okay? Is it like too loud? Okay. Two of the things that I see as potential solutions to these problems are really about community and about challenging our assumptions. And I already, as I said, already see that happening here today in the theme, and you can just look around and see the amount of community that's there. The photo that you see on the right was what we called a post-it wall in a classroom that I had in Miami in the Girls Who Code program. And what we did there was we had 17 high school students come in. They had no experience in computer science at the beginning of the summer. And after 7 weeks, they could program their own apps, they could build robots, they had learned 3 or 4 new languages. But on top of that, they were really confident in themselves. And they said, yeah, I'm a programmer, I'm a computer scientist, this is something that I can do. On top of that, while they had really great technical skill, they were using it and applying it to problems that they cared about. So a lot of them, they say they were interested in local politics, or they were concerned by news stories that they'd seen over the summer about children who were in cars who overheated. And I'm going to tell you about some of the solutions that they had to those problems. But they saw technology as a powerful tool to solve the problems that they cared about and the things that they were passionate about. So this is where I think that these two issues of diversity and technology and social impact are really connected. So first, just a little bit about my own experience, how I got interested in this. Has anyone here ever heard of Impostor Syndrome? Raise your hand if you have. A couple of people. So Impostor Syndrome is basically this idea that often when someone's in a minority group and they go into a classroom, it's easy for them to feel like they're a fraud, like the knowledge and the experience that they have is much less than other people, especially if they don't know the terminology. And this was really my experience in my first computer science class. I'd never programmed before, but somehow it felt like everyone around me had been programming for years, and they had all this terminology, and some of that was true. Some of them had more experience. And some of them, knew the words a lot better, but they didn't necessarily have, didn't mean that it was something that I couldn't do, although it felt that way. So I found this image online on the right about what imposter syndrome feels like, and it essentially feels like even though you might know about the same as another person, you just kind of have this overlap, it tends to feel like this is something you can't do, and like your own experience is so much less than theirs. There were two things that really helped to get over this, and what I found, the reason why I started talking about this is that it turns out that what happened in my experience is very common. It's not very special at all, and it's very common among women in computer science. And so I ended up getting over this by both learning to challenge my own assumptions about what I could do, but also getting involved in a community of women in tech. So this kind of awesome and crazy group you see up here is a photo from the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing, which is one of the largest worldwide conferences for women in technology. And it was I got a scholarship to attend that event when I was in college, and it was a real turning point for me because I was able to look around and say, well, I wasn't sure before in my classroom if this is something that I can do, but I see role models around me. I see this great community. I believe that this is something that I can do too. So I think computer scientists are, at their core, problem solvers. And I realized that this was an issue that really needed solving more than a lot of the technical challenges that I saw. But like a true computer scientist, you need to really look at the data. So I wanted to better understand what's often called the pipeline issue. Now, I have some issues with the word pipeline, and I'm happy that's another talk entirely, so I'm happy to talk about that afterwards. But when we talk about the pipeline issue, what we usually mean is looking at the groups of women studying computer science in high school, and then in college, and then in the workforce. Now, this is something that I've found to be, this is data from the US, and this is something that I've found to be not always consistent all over the world. Sometimes you'll have, in some countries, you'll have university systems where it's much more even, but it's not necessarily, doesn't translate to the workplace. So I would love to hear stories from you all. I've been hearing a few stories earlier today from some other women in tech. But you can see the issue in the US is fairly clear, that it starts even in high school or before high school. So on the right is the AP Computer Science course, which is an advanced course that you take in high school in the US. And often we talk about the gender gap in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But what you can see here is that one of the main issues is really in computer science. When you look at statistics, biology, a lot of advanced math courses, it's actually fairly even split. But AP Computer Science only has 19% of women taking the test. Then, of course, we go to college. And the image you see here in the middle is a study of computer science as a percentage of majors over time, and the number of men and women that participated in each. So what's kind of fascinating about computer science as a discipline, among other things, is that in the 1980s, we had more women as a percentage studying in computer science than we do now. So it's about 37% of computer science majors in 1984 were women. And today, depending on which study you look at, it's about somewhere between 12 and 19%. But what's kind of fascinating is that if you're, of course, familiar with the history of technology here, you'll see two very clear spikes in the 1980s and then in the late 90s, early 2000s. So those spikes essentially correlate to the release of the personal computer and then the rise of the internet, .com boom, World Wide Web. What's interesting is, of course, is that while women were really included in that spike in the 1980s, something happened in the 90s where they were no longer a part of it. There are several theories about this. One of them is that in the 1980s, we started to market the personal computer as a toy to boys. So it was around this time where we started to associate computers more with males and with females. I think that it's a really complicated issue, and so that's one of the popular theories, but you can see from the data that this is something that women have been interested in for some time, but somehow in the 90s they kind of got left out. Now, often I say, okay, great, so this is happening, but why does it matter? Well, I think the reason it really matters is that, as we've talked about today, technology runs every part of our lives. You know, you wake up with an alarm from your cell phone, you immediately get on your computer. Often, people will be sitting around with 3 or 4 devices running at once, if not more. So it runs so much of our lives, so I think we need to examine where it's coming from. On top of that, there's a lot of data and research that shows that diverse teams make better products and make decisions that work better. So you can see a few years ago, Google and a few of the other top technology companies, under some pressure from activists, started releasing their diversity stats. And you can see why, even at a company like Google, one of the most popular tech companies to work for, their tech workforce is 17% women. And then when you kind of get out further into the data around race and ethnicity, those numbers are even more staggering. So I think this really matters because a lot of what happens, and I think one of the reasons why this industry has gone down in terms of the gender gap, is partially about a lack of role models and lack of that community. So I don't think it's really just a pipeline issue, it's also an issue of cycles. So I want to do a little thought experiment for a moment about challenging assumptions. So I'd love for you to picture, you can picture a computer scientist in your mind or even a room of computer scientists. So just close your eyes, just take a minute. So if you're like most people, honestly, you probably saw one of these guys. These are, of course, founders of some of the greatest tech companies right now, Facebook, Microsoft, and Google. And you wouldn't be wrong. These men are all really amazing computer scientists. They've built wonderful companies. But my goal would be for when we think of a room of computer scientists, to think of a room that's a bit more like this. So here we have Grace Hopper, creator of the first compiler, Ada Lovelace, widely considered to be one of the first computer programmers, Jeanette Wing, who's a really amazing theoretical computer science researcher, Barbara Liskov on the top. She was one of the first women to receive the doctorate in computer science, and also one of the few women to receive the Turing Award, which is essentially kind of the top prize you can get in technology. Annie Easley, who was both a rocket scientist and a computer scientist and built code to program the Centaur robot. And Margaret Hamilton, who actually interestingly coined the word software engineering. And that's the printed out code for the Apollo guiding system for the Apollo mission, printed out there in front of her, just about as tall as she is. So my idea is really just that we want to be able to both recognize that there's a large community of women in tech who've had an influence on the space and on the technology. But we also want to be able to say, when we think of a computer scientist, to really challenge that assumption about what we think that looks like. One of Grace Hopper's nicknames was Amazing Grace, and she gives us a really great analogy for thinking about challenging assumptions and doing things in a different way than they've been done before. She had a clock in her office that had the numbers backward, and they worked for the text worked backward. And what she said was, people have an enormous tendency to resist change. They love to say, we've always done it this way. I try to fight that. That's why I have the clock on the wall. So it was a constant reminder for her to say, just because something's been done one way doesn't mean we need to continue to do it this way. We need to constantly be challenging those assumptions. So this is where I think we can take some of the lessons learned in the continuing struggle to diversify the technology workforce and apply it to diversifying the uses of technology for more social change. So on the first piece, I think that it's possible for us to really expand our vision around what technology can do and the different kinds of problems that it can solve. I think it's also possible for us to do that through community and brainstorming. One of the examples that I had from this with my experience in the classroom, as I mentioned earlier, I had a group of students who one summer were really concerned about a lot of the stories that they had read about cars overheating and like a baby or a small child being left in the car and pass away. So they were really affected and motivated by this really sad story. And we had learned quite a few technical skills at that point. They learned some pretty advanced programming. They learned a few different technologies and a few different languages. But it wasn't quite what they needed to solve this problem. They knew that they needed to use something that involved physical computing. So they did some research and they said, well, we need to learn to program an Arduino board. And I said, great, I've actually never programmed an Arduino board before, but we're going to figure it out together. And what they did is they were so motivated by this problem that they were working all night, figuring out all the technology, testing everything. And what they built was a car seat that had a pressure and temperature sensor that would send off an emergency alert when both of those went off. So the idea is that if a child was in the car and the car was overheating, an emergency alert could be sent. And these were girls who, a month and a half before hadn't ever programmed at all. So what I've found is that when you really show people what a powerful tool technology can be and all the things that it can do, that they use it to solve the problems that they care about. So I want to talk about a couple examples that I've seen of interesting uses of technology used for social change. Right now, there's a lot of interesting applications and phone apps and things like that that are using a lot of cloud technology and optimization software to be able to connect wasted resources with the people who need them. So one of those examples is a company called Serum, founded by this woman, Kia Williams. And the problem she was interested in solving was that there's a lot of wasted, expensive medicine in the world. So someone gets sick, they have enough health insurance to cover the costs, they get the medicine, but then they get better and they throw that medicine out. Of course, there's also a lot of people who get the same illness, don't have the same health insurance or ability to pay, and they're not able to afford the medicine. So her technology connects those two, does it in a really efficient way, using cloud software and things like that. Similarly, there's another company in Nigeria called Cloudberry that was developed by a software engineer who saw a similar waste issue with food and the people who needed access to affordable nutrition. So what they developed is an app, again, cloud connected, that will, where someone who's walking through the grocery store, one of the employees, they can easily enter food that's about to expire or food that's about to go on sale, and so that it gets uploaded much more quickly and people can quickly get access to this information, so that they're able to get access to more affordable food, and they connect this app to NGOs and charities and low-income families so that they're able to get quicker access to affordable nutrition. Finally, another one I really love is called Artlifting, and this woman, Liz Powers, was motivated by the problem of homeless and disabled artists who are creating really beautiful art that aren't able to get access to potential clients or aren't able to sell what they do. So she created a platform that helps connect those artists with clients and with sales support so that they're able to really have some sort of an income stream from what they're doing. Again, so far, a lot of the social impact technology I've seen is around applications. I just briefly want to mention a couple areas where there's really early work being done to look at some other more unlikely and more advanced technologies and what they can do. So everyone's freaking out about blockchain right now, of course. In the US, everyone's wondering if they should have bought Bitcoin a long time ago. But I think one of the most fascinating things about cryptocurrencies is really not the currencies themselves, it's the technology of blockchain behind it. And it's a very fascinating technology, and there are some potential interesting applications. IBM started to do some work on applying the issue of blockchain to the supply chain of food products that have been tampered with or have bacteria, and being able to just quickly and more efficiently figure out where that came from. So one of the organizations that's taking this idea is called slavefreetrade.org. So again, applying this to a supply chain problem, what they're trying to figure out is how can we anonymously and efficiently figure out the supply chain of a product and whether or not it's been developed somewhere using slave labor. So part of the issues with this are general challenges with this problem are that there's a really complex and complicated supply chain, but on top of that, it's difficult for people to report this information. So blockchain may potentially be a solution to this. It's not clear yet whether or not that's the case. This is really early work, but I'm excited that this is something that they're exploring. Similarly, another major issue in the US has been the opioid crisis. And on top of that, the use of fentanyl in heroin and the overdoses that can cause. One, again, a research area right now, not clear if it's a solution yet, is potentially blockchain, again, because there's a really complex supply chain, and people need to be, if they have information about this, they need to be able to report it anonymously, because obviously it's illegal, there's a lot of shame around it, so this is an area where they're starting to do some research. It's a huge problem in the US, and hopefully this can be part of the solution. And finally, of course, I think that artificial intelligence has a lot of potential applications for social impact. So we were talking a bit about AI earlier and the regulation around it and things like that. I think that I agree that there can be a lot of fear about AI. But ultimately, we have to realize that we're responsible for it, and it's something that we as humans create. So it is an extremely powerful tool, especially in a very data-driven world. There's some interesting research being done at the University of Southern California, where there was a research group there, a health epidemiology sort of group, that was trying to work with the issue of HIV spreading in homeless youth communities in LA. And what they ended up talking with a group of computer scientists there, because what they had done was they were working with homeless youth who were really popular among their peers and getting them to be leaders and talk to their friends and provide education trainings. But what they found was that while that did spread the information better and more people started getting tested, they weren't necessarily able to reach as many people as they were hoping. And so they tried manually to start mixing up groups of youth that they had tracked to try to spread the message more widely, but it wasn't really gaining enough traction. So one of the things that they did was they worked with a group of computer scientists to be able to better track the youth that they had already identified as needing to receive this information. Nice. And they used an AI algorithm to better mix up those groups so that they could gain more spread. And they used the AI to track the social groups and figure out what was the most efficient pattern for them to, get this information out. So what they found through that work is that with the AI algorithm developing the education groups, they were both able to get this information to a lot more students. They were able to increase the number of homeless youth in LA getting tested for HIV. And interestingly, I think some of the leaders of those groups actually, they also measured the empowerment factor and the confidence of the group leaders. And the ones in the AI group had an even higher degree of that. So as I said, the connection that I see between these two challenges is about community and using the power of community and groups working together to come up with creative solutions and challenging assumptions about what can be done. So maybe blockchain isn't just about cryptocurrencies, and maybe AI isn't just about all the different kinds of things that we use AI for, and autonomous vehicles and Siri and things like that. Maybe there's a wider range of things that we can do with these technologies. So my ideas for action for a few of you in the audience, I know there's a lot of really technical people here. So if you are really technical and you don't teach already, please start teaching what you do to new people and encourage their creative ideas. As I said, with this group of Girls Who Code students, I had no idea that they would create something as interesting as that Arduino project. That didn't come from me as that teacher, that came from them. But I just encouraged them, and I was very made sure that rigorously that they had really good technical skills. If you don't have a lot of experience with technology, start learning. There's a lot of really interesting hacker spaces I heard about here today. There's a lot of great courses online, so try taking something on. Great. I think we're starting to get it up. So the last one is that as you're starting to pursue some creative uses for the technology that you're interested in and the problems that you care about, understand that it's okay to fail. A lot of these things aren't going to work the first time. I've heard it said that people in Silicon Valley are more respected when they've had more failed companies. No one takes you seriously unless you've had 2 failed startups already. So feel free to just try something. That's often the way that you need to get your learnings to get to a new solution. And again, just as I said at the beginning, just really start to ask the question. I don't necessarily have a silver bullet for this, but I think that there is a lot more potential for the kinds of problems that we use technology for, and there's a lot of mismatch there right now. So kind of just ask the question, can we use this technology for something else? Is there a creative solution to this problem that we see locally? And finally, the last thought I'll leave you with is that we can code it. So this is a group, one of my group of students in Miami. At the end of the summer, we were very inspired by Rosie the Riveter, and of course her message in the US to American women was to to step up and really be a part of the solution that the country needed at the time. I think that similarly, what we can take from that now is that there is a huge need. We do have these wonderful technologies and tools, and with a diverse workforce, we can come up with some creative community solutions to these problems. So I've already seen that happening a lot here today, and I hope that you will all continue to code the change that you want to see. And that's all, and I'll take questions if you have any. Thanks.